Well, it's another day. We've been driving along. Every now and again we get a clunk, and it usually happens first thing in the morning. It's quite nice having a knocking sound coming from a truck, but this is the only time this knocks is when it's driving. When it's stationary, nothing. So I decided to lift the cab and have a quick look. On this model, I've never seen this before, and I've looked at various photos on the internet. But this one, you've got the leaf spring here, the U-bolts holding the axle to the leaf spring, and then this one has got a really crudely made bracket here with a tie bar which runs down to the front of the chassis. So the purpose of that is when you brake, it can't push the spring back, so it locates the axle a little bit. But what I found is it's loose, so I've tightened it up a couple of turns now, and it just needs a bit more. The front one was exactly the same, so I've done that as well without filming because it's nothing exciting. But what I'm doing now, if I show you, quite a simple one. Spanner on the top, keep tightening it, yeah, as far as it'll go, and then a little bit of a, just tighten it down a bit more with a hammer, and job's a good one. Right, that's tight. But whilst I was having a look around, I spotted I fitted two new engine mounts about a year ago, which are these little rubbers here. One was simple to go in, the other one was a bit of a fiddle, and I don't know why. But what I've noticed is the washer here, if you look closely, it'll focus. There's a little black line between the washer and the nut, so it's loose. And also, if you look at the washer to the bracket there, there's a break in the dirt. It should just be dirt, so guaranteed that's loose. We'll find out. It so happens I've got this spanner ready. There we go. That wasn't the knocking noise because it's only the engine mount's a little bit loose. So the worst thing is nut falls out the other one and then the engine falls on the floor, but I very much doubt it. So excuse me while I grunt. There is a tightening torque on this one. It's called tighten it till it shears and then half a turn back. Oh, shaky arm, that's the best way. So what I'm going to do now is walk around the other side and see if it's loose that side. Right, this one's a little bit more hidden, which is just underneath the dynamo. And yeah, that's correct, the dynamo. Because it's such an old truck, I can find the nut in the bolt in the dark. There's somewhere. There we go. Yeah, fraction of a turn, next to nothing, so that's okay. Well, I've just been having a look around because it's an old vehicle, it's got a few years behind it, so it was worth just looking at a few problems and make sure there's nothing wrong. And I've just spotted one now, which I've done is the lead there isn't located properly in the cover here. It's dropped down before I've nipped it up. I'll push that back in. There we go. Retighten. Just silly mistakes, but things happen. We did have a breakdown probably 3-4 weeks ago. It just cut out, completely cut out. So I changed the fuel filter first of all. It had a small one on, which was a much finer, it was made of paper, whereas this one's like a nylon. Not very impressed with it, doesn't seem to stop much, but it's clean. And I had one HT lead which was breaking down, so I've changed that. And the whole fault ended up as inside the, you've got the points and condenser inside the distributor, and there was oil on the points which was shorting out, so it would run fine, get hot, I don't know whether the oil got thinner and it just brought in a misfire, and then it just cut out completely. Cleaned off with a little bit of petrol, and there we go. Job's a good one. So just checking a fan belts are all right. Everything's tight. Looking along, I've found one minor problem here, which is the fuel pipe. This fuel pipe is 1 year old. Look at the cracks in it. And that's from a reputable car shop, and it wasn't cheap. But they're buying the cheap Chinese rubbish and selling it out for good prices. This has got the same idea, the same torsion bar on both sides, but I've checked this is tight, and this one's also had wire locking on it, so I'll have to have a route around and see if I can get a bit of wire locking for the other side so it doesn't come loose. And for the bright sparks of you, there's a coil with nothing. It's got an invisible lead. What I've done is, or a couple of years ago, I was getting an occasional misfire on it, which I couldn't work out what it was, thinking, oh, the coil's getting hot because it sat on top of the engine. So I've moved it to there, which is then in the airflow from the engine, or from the front, and it still runs warm, they're supposed to, but not as hot. And then just an extra long lead going up. But it didn't cure the problem. It ended up as, it was fuel. There was a fuel tap, which was here, and you turn it for left tank to the front for right tank. And if you got the tap and pulled it up, it gave a leak. So the actual tap itself lifted up about 1 millimeter, and then as the pump is sucking the fuel, it just sucked air through here instead. So sometimes you turn the pump, turn to the other tank, and if you press down to turn, it would suck the fuel up and it would run fine until it cut out again. Either it started rattling up, or other times when it cut out, you turn the pump, turn the tap to the other tank, but lift it as you turn it, and it still wouldn't run. So it was a real funny one to find. But they are adjustable, you can adjust them, but I've ended up putting 2 fuel pumps on instead, one for each tank, so that when you run out of fuel on the road, you just flick the switch on the dashboard, the other pump comes in, and then it runs fine. That's the much better way of doing it. Now this lever's this is just the rattly lever that does nothing. It's the one that would go onto the power takeoff from the gearbox, which would run a winch or a generator, but it's locked in. There's your gear lever, which is behind the driver. This is the heater system for the hot water system to heat the radiator before the engine started. Gear lever for high ratio, the middle's neutral, the back's low ratio, and then you've got, that's in rear wheel drive. Bang the lever forwards, you get the front axle in, so you get 4-wheel drive. This is the little pump, the little handle here, which operates the central air tyre inflation system, so you can either let the tyres down or let them up when you're running. Got a high rev. This is a little thing. If you put the knob, if you pull it up, it closes off louvers to the radiator, so it'll run warm even when it's -40. But I've never used it yet. Old-fashioned choke. So if you've got any children watching, ask your parents what a choke is. That's the handbrake. Turn it to release, pull it up, and it just clicks. Oh, and that funny little thing there is the breather for the servo brakes, which are about halfway down the truck, and that is the battery master switch to switch the battery off. At the moment it's in the off position, not because I'm working on it, just I don't need it on. That's about it really. And and the springs there, they're not for any sort of cab comfort, because there's no comfort in this. That's purely to help with opening the cab. They just give a bit of oomph so you can tip the cab forward. Up there, that's the old fuel filter, which I don't need because I've now got fuel filters underneath, modern ones, but it's just part of the history, so I've left it on. Although the pipes are, you know, doing nothing, the other end goes nowhere. It's just one of those things I might as well leave on. I think this here is the compressor, which does the air for the brakes and the central tyre inflation system, and then over the other side, that's the reservoir and pump for the power steering. This is the obviously the air filter, but it's an oil bath, so it's got oil, 30 millilitres of oil, so it's a Coke can full of oil up to about there. So the air goes in through the oil and into the carburettor. So the oil cleans the air, which is, it's good because there's no spare parts needed. And that's the, what's it called, the oil filter, which is a centrifugal type. So as it's spinning, it throws the dirt to the side of the aluminium block, and it just builds up with dirt on there. And then when it's time for the oil change, you take that off, or change the oil, take that off, just scrape the dirt out, clean it, put it back, and there you go. No oil filter needed. So these things are designed to be maintained in the field with no parts really. Everything is demountable. You can take everything apart and fix everything. And there are workshop manuals, but they're all in Russian, but they do give the pictures, which is the main thing of how to do it, and then torque settings, etc. You can work that out just by what they're doing, and everything's written in English with the torque setting, or in normal lettering for numbers. It's just their writing that's in Cyrillic. But yeah, it's pretty simple. And on this side, this is the other side now, we've got the power steering, which is, it's a strange system. There's a good amount of play in this steering wheel and down here. But what happens when the engine's running, this pressurizes and it holds it still, and then when you force the steering one way, it opens a valve which allows oil under pressure to steer it. So this does steer it. You actually push it as well, but it helps with the power assisting. And when you steer the other way, it'll open the valve the other side, which then directs high pressure fluid to the ram to help you push it the other way. But normally when people go on, they go, oh, you've got loads of give in your steering, look at the play in it. But it isn't, it's just a different design. This little doofree here, you've got this here, which is a fan that spins. It pushes air into this system here, and then there's an exhaust underneath. There's a fuel tank there. Fuel comes down into the little solenoid here. And with this contraption here, you've got an on switch which heats up the glow plug inside, which is that one there. You've got the up, which, oh, one on, will switch the fan on so it's spinning. And then when you want to ignite the fuel, so you've now got the spark plugs hot, the glow plugs hot, there's an airflow going through. You do the second pull up, which then speeds the fan up a little bit more, opens the solenoid, and then fuel is under gravity, enters, you hear a whoomph, and it lights up. So you've got a tube inside, and around the outside it's a canister full of water, and the water is just drains down, or it fills this up, and then through the heat that's generated, it starts to self-circulate through the engine, and it goes through the back of the engine here, the back of both heads, and then comes out at the bottom of the engine there. But what I've done, or vice versa, what I've done though is I've disconnected the engine system, and I now run these pipes that go directly to a calorifier inside the truck. So when we want hot water, we can switch this system on. It takes about 3 minutes, and we've got 22 litres of boiling water at 90 degrees, which is incredible. But when we're driving, I've also run off the back of the head here 2 pipes which go into the calorifier again, but on a different coil inside, and that heats the water whilst we're driving. It stays hot for about 24 hours. It wasn't quite as good as I was expecting, but you know, the actual tank is good quality. It just doesn't keep the heat. Oh, and what I've also done with this is fitted an electric water pump, which is the BMW sort of Volkswagen type, just like a little 90-degree thing. So as soon as you switch that on, there's a wire that runs through a relay, switches the pump on, and then it circulates, so it heats up a lot quicker. Otherwise, the amount of time you'd wait for this would be red hot, and it'd have to get so high to start heating the coil, and with it only being a small diameter, it just didn't work properly. So it was better to run a coil in, a pump in there as well. And this is the overflow pipe, because it gets hot and there's pressure, and it's not running through the radiator system. I'll put an expansion tank. It's just an aluminium one with a proper radiator cap on the top. So it's got as long as it's full to about there with water, it's got an expansion then, and it's given no problems. So I think that's about it for today. Okie dokie.